Hey, people, just hanging out in the kids' room, about to do a little dinosaur dance. No, just a little build tutorial on the Betaflight 4.6. You know, this thing's kind of like a mad scientist with there's so much to remember and changes and things of that nature. I have to go back and research a lot sometimes to figure out some things I've done forgot. And just you can pay attention to this and pick on a few little pointers and notes if you want to on the build. If you watched my thermal video from before, these are just some of the settings that I went through, and I added a gimbal, so I had to go back and reflash firmware and pull up and change servos and things of that nature. It gets a little aggravating and time taking, but this might help you out if you want to watch it. Alright, people, about to go through a little Betaflight 4.6 tutorial. So when you're flashing your firmware in here and you're going to the development of 4.6, so be careful here, because things can go wrong. You can mess up your flight controller. Everybody knows they throw up the warnings and all that, but in here you want to make sure you got development chose, and then of course you can plug up your board and do an auto detect, or just choose your board. If you know your firmware that your board is running, just make sure you choose the right one. And auto detect is a good feature, and some boards might not pick up though, some of the older versions and things of that nature. And just make sure you get the right board. And in here you want to make sure you got to choose analog or HD OSD. That just changed within the past week, because I don't know what they'll do later on when the boards come out with double OSD. But so make sure you get your right pin IOs, your VTX setup, your mags, your GPS, and all that chose. Now in this menu you can go through the list and choose what you need, but some things like the position hold is not available in this choice. You have to pull it manually. So make sure, we'll get to that point in just a minute, but just make sure you got everything you need here, or you'll have to go back and get it. I'm running the mag, GPS on mine, the pin IO for the VTX switch on the Flywheel Goku setup that I do, and I like that board a lot. Right here now, peel the position underscore hold underscore mode, or you could see me typing it in there. Just follow the same procedure if you're trying to do this. And also on the pull request, you got to do the pound 13975, I believe it is. I'll show you that here in just a minute. And when you punch this in, you have to hit enter, or it will not save. You just can't type it in there and back out. You have to hit enter. So make sure you do that. The cloud build now, you have to make sure everything is chose that you need. Crossfire is automatically loaded, I think. D-shot, telemetry automatically included in there. You can change that up if you need to, but just make sure you get everything you need in there the right way before you build the firmware. So right here, after you hit load firmware online, it starts to build. And if you got everything correct, now this thing is changing so fast because it's in development mode. And I noticed on my test flight, after I'd done this and flashed it this time, I just had a little bit of an issue with the OSD, but I added a timer on there. It was flashing, but when I did my GPS rescue, I think the thing only missed the landing spot by about like 1 foot. So I know they must be doing some good magic on these builds and formulas, but it's just changing so fast. So I'll probably keep the build I have for right now unless something changes. I'm still working with that GM gimbal, trying to get it balanced right because the camera's too heavy, but my test flight went well. If you notice right here, you can, after you do your build, you can click on this and just save this build, so you won't have to do it every time if you know you got it right, and you'll have it in your files to load firmware local, and that's a big help. But I notice I do my dump on my builds in the CLI and make sure I copy that and back it up, so when I got my aux channels and everything set up correctly like I want them, and my OSDs and my VTX tables, I can go back in and just copy and paste them into the new builds, and I won't have to reset up everything every time we go back in. And you can notice here I'm going into my setup and you can see the magnometers and all that working. Make sure you calibrate your accelerometer and your magnometer correctly, so you want to have that right. And you can see in here I've got my ports set up in serial for my VTX trim on the smart audio is VTX tramp, and I got that set up on UR3. I think I have like the GPS, you've seen the settings in there, you got to have everything correct for your ports and your GPS and your mag and all that to work. And notice right here I've got a counterclockwise 180 flip for my mag, and you have to have that set up for your board or whichever GPS you have. Now all this is pretty basic. If you've been in builds and building your own, you know all of these settings pretty much is basic. Now some of it has changed a little bit, but not much. But just you can see my settings as I'm going through them if you want to try one of these builds. Now I'm in the GPS settings. Now on the failsafe, you want to choose GPS rescue, of course, and it shows on the left side all your aux channels and things of that nature. So just choose GPS rescue. I'm just going to show just a few of the settings for the GPS setup and the rescue and the descend mode, the climb mode when you activate GPS rescue. Position hold, altitude hold, and GPS rescue, along with another switch for the settings just to keep it safe. I have an angle mode or set up in there, and so if I lose my bearings I can just click it, and on the altitude hold anyway, when you click that, it's going to go over to that mode to hold up in there. You notice here on the right side now I'm showing you I know the one I'm on now, I believe, is the one when you descend on GPS rescue. It dropped a little faster than I wanted to the first time, so I decreased it a little bit, got that where I wanted it. Also set your altitude you want your drone to climb to in these settings up at the top. And now just your hover throttle, make sure you got that setting close or as close as possible. It gives you an explanation of how to pick it up here, and just follow directions on that. I didn't go through this process. I just pretty much paid attention to when I hit altitude hold. If my drone climbed, I just decreased it a little bit, or if it dropped, I increased it a little bit, and it seemed to work fine for me. So we got to have 8 satellites to arm if you set that, but you can click allow arming without GPS fix I have not done, I've done it like that at first, but now I'm leaving mine as is because I've got a little bit tied up into this drone. I don't want to lose it, so that could happen. And now, if you lost your drone and you wanted to spin your motors up to make some noise, then you wouldn't be able to arm if you had less than 8 satellites. So now we're going to go in and I set up the servo. So I do have the GM1 gimbal, like I said, set up, and I've got that on aux channel 7. Now I did had to go into the CLI and I had to remap and use my motors. I had to use motor number 5 as my pin for the servo. So now on this, I've got the Galileo satellites checked. I got ground detect, auto assistance, and for the magnetometers, you've got to set your declination. You can set that in here, and you can also set it in the CLI. I had trouble with it saving in here one time, so pay attention, make sure it saves when you change that. Just basic from a motor setup. I wish I had the updated BL32 on here, but I don't, so I can't run the motor timing and the RPM filters like I would want it to, but I'll probably change this ESC out later. But right now I'm just started with it on this test build, and I like the way it's flying, so I don't think I'll need that right now. But the RPM filters are better if you have AM32 firmware, Blue Jay, or updated version of BL32, which I did not on these ESCs, and they cut out BL32, so I can't update it. But pay attention to all that. This is just the VTX settings, and I have the TX1600 VTX on there, so you've seen those settings. The OSD, I think I've got too much in here now. First time I built the build, I didn't have no issues with the OSD. I think last time I tested it, I didn't have it on my HD0 goggles, but my OSD seemed to be flashing on the little screen, so I added the time in here, and that might be what done it, because that time is ticking, it was flashing, so it might have been just too much, but the OSD was flickering. So I'm going to drop my name and stop that timer from flashing, because I want my time frame on there for when I'm flying with the thermal, looking for deer or whatever you have it. Then I want to keep track of those times. So, and this is just showing you how I have my OSD set up, but anybody can set it up basically however you want to. Just going through these features for you if this is your first time or you're building, but there's a lot of choices in here. It's pretty self-explanatory when you're looking through. Right here now you can set this. I have mine set to 250. I had this issue, I was wondering where to stop it from flashing when you get over 100 feet, but that's where you set it at. So now I got to stop my timer, and hopefully I can do it there as well. Now, if your camera is a PAL, or you have to make sure you have that chosen. The thermal camera I have is, so it won't work properly. Same thing in the HD0 goggles. You had to go in there and choose PAL when you're recording on that, or want the AV input to work on your HD0 goggles. You have to choose the PAL setting, or it won't pick up correctly. Make sure after you get all your settings, you hit save, so you don't waste any time there. If you back out and you change some things, you'll have to just come back and do it again. So make sure, and then all your post-flight settings, I have mine set to show all my times, my distance, and my amps, and my low battery, min link qualities, and things of that nature for after the flight. So just make sure you choose all that you want. In the CLI, I'm just going to drop and set my, just showing my resource. So I had to change, motor 5. I resourced it to none and resourced my servo 1 to this setting that I needed, like the CO8, I think it was. You can see it here in just a minute on the servo setting, but make sure you just have to remap those. There's some videos out there that show you how to do that, so I'm not going to go through all that. And if you're not real familiar with the CLI, after you do a dump, you can go back up like I mentioned and choose your aux channels, any settings that go in here, and you can pretty much carry those forward to your new builds as they go along, and you have to flash and want to try the newer versions before they release, because they're steadily making changes in these things, and they're coming across on the cloud build, I'm sure. So it's just pretty much date formats and everything. Just going through the list here, just showing you a few things on there if you're not familiar with it. It's very helpful when you can just copy and paste your settings that you want to carry over, so just keep that in mind when you copy and just save your whole dump file, so you can just change those over, carry them over easy, and save you some time for the future builds. Now right here I'm just going to show you can set _mag and then choose declination, but this will show you all your mag settings and things of that nature. When you start, it just pops up and shows just pretty easy. So that is how you set your mag one way. But on the other GPS setting, like I showed you before, you can go right here and set your declination as well.